Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. We are here today with our hundreds, even thousands of fans. All right, well, there's
always gets better.
Probably 10 of you out there, but thank you, Martin.
Yes.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Matt and Josiah and all the folks from Salem who still listen to this podcast. I have successfully grown my podcast down to about 40 listeners. So those of you who are still here, congratulations.
Congratulations, you made it.
You made it to episode number 100.
Now you need to do the little sound effect thing again because that's impressive. Well done. Good job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your help and your support and all of you who have made this possible. All right. Well, we are excited today because we have a list of the top 10 episodes from the first 100. So this is the top 10%, I guess you would say, of Gleaning and Gathering over the past 100 episodes. And we convinced Kaylynn to come back for an encore.
That's right. One last time. No, I'm joking.
One last time to review this and talk a little bit about each episode and just recap it. So at number 10, coming in at number 10, Till Death Do Us Part, dragged my wife into the studio for our 24th anniversary and was able to record this episode with her. And so that was kind of fun and it was exciting. It was a great time. And it's definitely worth a listen to. If you haven't listened to this episode, we kind of go into talking about marriage and life and get her perspective.
I think this is, revelation. I have not listened to all of your episodes. Most of the time, I get to hear you talk about it in person.
Neither is my wife, actually. She is starting, though.
She's
finally
doing
convinced.
Yes, I was impressed. She's like going through from the beginning.
Yes.
It's amazing. But this one is actually one that I think I listened to all the way through, and it was very good. Yeah.
Till Death Do Us Part. Coming in at number 9, Delight, Making Your Soul Happy in the Lord. Talking about George Mueller. Of course, he's the one who used that phrase. And talking about Christian delight and how we as Christians need to really not just focus on duty, but focus on delight. There's a fun episode.
The other side of the disciplines.
Yeah. Good episode. Lots of little gems there from Brother George Mueller's life and focusing on that. Number 8, Rhythms and Rule of Life. Kaylynn, do you have a rule of life?
I don't think I've ever listened to this podcast episode. I'm not going to
lie. I know
you
have rhythms, but do you have a rule of life?
A rule of life. What would give me a quick definition of a rule of life?
So those are things that you are doing regularly to feed your soul, to develop you. There are systems that you're putting in place. So for instance, having a daily rule of life, read your Bible, pray every day, and you grow. That would be an example. On a weekly basis, going to church, spending time, doing fasting, praying, whatever else. Those are things that would be considered to be part of a weekly rule of life. And then things that are on a monthly or a quarterly or an annual basis that you're doing regularly and repeatedly, that would be part of a rule of life.
And these are like the principles behind the habits that you do or the things that you do, or they are the things that you do?
They are the things that you do, but things that you're doing intentionally. Okay. As in, I'm taking a day each month to devote to prayer. That would be part of a rule of life.
Okay.
Or every Sunday afternoon, I'm going to take a walk and reflect. Related to rhythms. So you can have daily rhythms, weekly rhythms. But I talk a little bit more about some of the ones that I've instituted in my life in that episode. Episode number 8. There you go.
All right. I'm going to mark that one for listen.
Reaching the Unreached, an interview with Dr. Stephen Gibson, recorded in his basement.
Oh, good. So good.
There in southern Indiana. And it was fun to pick his brain and talk about missions and missions philosophy. And so that was number 7. Then we have, what do we have? Oh,
Reading.
Belonging. Who are your people?
Ah, yes.
And this is one I got a lot of feedback on. But it was a reflection on a conference that I was part of in Atascadero, California.
Oh, for Sacred Roots.
Yes.
Okay.
Where Dr. Don Davis asked the question, who are your people? He said a lot of Christians identify with someone. He said, kind of like I identify with the Los Angeles Lakers. I wear their jersey.
You're a fan.
I'm a fan.
But who's coming looking for you? Is that
yeah, if I got lost,
yeah.
the Los Angeles Lakers are not coming looking for me. I may identify with them, but I don't belong to them. And so his question was, who do you belong to? Who are your people? If you get lost, who's coming looking for you? There's a lot there, and it was a fun episode to record.
I think it's probably one of the deficits. No, that's not the right word. It's one of the areas of our society that is what's the word that I'm looking for?
Well, I think there's a huge epidemic of loneliness.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, we're more connected than ever before, and we are more alone than ever before. Last
night we had a party for one of my sisters, and my grandparents came over. Anyways, my grandpa had been looking at a chart. It started in, I think, the 1920s or something like that. I don't remember. Anyways, and each decade showed kind of the percentage that where people spent their time.
Right.
The percentages of where people spent their time, and lots of different things: church, bars, school, friends, things like that. But in what was the date on that?
Mid-90s.
Mid-90s. Okay, so then
it began to
the internet
emerge.
Came into existence, and suddenly it was one of the names on the list of things that people spent their time on, and very quickly it became 60% of what the mass population is spending their time on. And that meant everything else that had been taking up like 20%, 30% suddenly was shoved into this tiny category. Everything had to take up 40%. And it seems like, yeah, we're connected. And yet the actual connections that people were having, church, family, friends, yes, all of the random things that people did got pushed aside and out of the way.
Yep.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and you see that. I mean, I remember growing up, I mean, there were cars out, cruising around the block and doing crazy stuff. Teenagers doing that, going to the mall, all that. Like,
right. You fill your time with something.
None of that exists anymore.
Yeah.
It's just gone. So that is episode number 6, Belonging. Who are your people? And then I did an episode on Dietrich Bonhoeffer called Grace and Discipleship.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship. It's a spiritual classic. Every Christian should read it. Every Christian should also read Life Together. So if you've not read those, huge shout out for Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Life Together is a little smaller, I think.
It is. 5 chapters, very short book, but powerful, powerful book. Every Christian should read it. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you don't know, was a Lutheran pastor, theologian, church leader during World War II. And he participated in a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. I think in his words, he said he was being contrary to the gospel for the gospel's sake. And so ended up being executed shortly before the Allies arrived. And he was really a martyr. But he was also an amazing intellect and someone that I highly encourage you to read.
And had some pretty strong views on lots of different current events. I think he came to the United States, and anyways, there were some things that he noticed with like the racial tensions.
Right.
And anyways, so he has a lot of different things to say on topics that are honestly still relevant.
Yeah,
today.
Absolutely. Well, he's an important voice and one that unfortunately was cut short, but definitely he's also someone that if you do read and dig deeper into Bonhoeffer, you have to understand the context that he's writing in.
Right.
And so some of his later writings, I think you kind of got to take some of it with a grain of salt.
Oh, yes.
Because there's a lot of later Dietrich Bonhoeffer that's very
cynical.
Well, yeah, and I think even somewhat like was struggling emotionally and physically and psychologically in a way that affected the things that he was writing.
Mm-hmm.
So just, yeah.
I think
That
it's
caveat.
a good rule for most, even spiritual classics. Just because it is a good book doesn't mean that it needs to be taken hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, not gospel truth. It's eat the meat, spit out the bones.
Right.
But anyway, if you dig it down into Bonhoeffer and say, well, wait a minute, what are we doing? This guy's a heretic.
Right.
Why did he believe? Because some of his later writings, I think, there was some unbalance there. But I probably would have been unbalanced if I was facing torture and constant threat of death in a prison as well. So, got to give a guy some grace. Number 4, gleaning in Gatlinburg. And so I recorded a series of interviews there. It was a lot of fun, and it was
Who was
great.
in those? I don't remember.
I don't remember all of the people that were in there, but I do remember Ethan Horde.
Aha.
He was memorable.
Good.
And
Yes.
so we got to interview Ethan and company. It was fun, good time. And gleaning in Gatlinburg, they're at the Interchurch Holiness Convention that happens every year now in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, formerly in Dayton, Ohio, but they moved down to Tennessee a few years ago.
In the mountains.
In the mountains. So we'll be there again, Lord willing, in April, and look forward to connecting with some more folks. Coming in at number 3 is your episode, the very first episode we ever recorded together, a father-daughter conversation on parenting and
What
education.
was it not on?
And just whatever you wanted to talk about.
Yes,
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed recording that episode. I really enjoyed just the feedback that I got back afterward too. But you saying, you can't ask me that question.
Oops. Yeah.
Oh, that was funny.
Oh dear.
What stuck out to you from that episode? Since that's one episode that you actually have listened to.
I definitely experienced that one. The length was pretty intense. I don't remember how long we ended up recording for, but it was a fair bit of time. It was very fun. Yes, I remember having to go and get multiple papers that I had written in the middle of the episode because I was trying to remember what some of the things you were asking. I was like, I don't know. I gotta go do some research real fast.
Yes.
Anyways.
Well, we do lots of research on this podcast.
That's right.
Anybody who's listened to it for very long at all knows that we
come to the table with lots of
research exhaustively and
right.
only deliver the most excellent of content.
Only the best for you, our listeners.
Absolutely. So, and if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you.
Right.
It's located
Somewhere
in San
in
Francisco,
Topeka.
California, and it's called the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
All right. Now, a people after God's own heart. Most people that listened to the podcast early on ended up coming as a result of this one episode. So what was happening in the world at the time was that on Wednesday, there was this group of students that stayed after chapel at Asbury University because of a message that had been shared on really loving God and loving others and a challenge to perfect love. And they stayed after to pray, and they just stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed. And I saw, I think it was on Friday, something about this, group of students, like around the clock, they were there. And on Saturday morning, I went to the prayer chapel and was praying, came back, checked Facebook, and saw like one of these stories. And my heart was just drawn to this. And so I jumped up, I shared with Rochelle, I really think I need to go. And so Samuel and Matthew and I, another guy from the farm here, headed to Asbury that day and got there about 1:00 in the afternoon and just had this amazing time of really just soaking in God's presence and being with what God was doing there. And it was really special. Like there were hundreds of thousands of people ultimately that descended on Wilmore, Kentucky. And it became just so unsustainable in the later days, just, people just standing in line for hours to just maybe get in, and then multiple locations there around campus. And just, there's nothing there in Wilmore, Kentucky
Right.
to be able to sustain thousands and thousands of people. I mean, there's just no place to stay. There's no restaurants. It's just, it's just a little place. And yet there were people that were just really hungry. Anyway, we came back home from that, and Sunday morning I just sat down in front of a camera and just shared this story of what God had done for me, what he was doing there. And it kind of just went viral. And over the next few days, I think 316,000 people watched this little tiny video that I had created here. And there were thousands of people that reached out to me, literally thousands of messages. It was just, I'd never had anything like this happen.
Right.
And of course, it was part of the larger framework of what was going on. And people were very interested in it. And so during that time, I released this episode sharing what had happened there. And hundreds of people listened and found the podcast. And so as a result of that, there was this momentary increase in listeners to the podcast.
I think part of the reason, I don't know for sure, can't analyze everybody's heart and say this is exactly the reason, but I do wonder if anytime something really spectacular happens or special happens, like what happened at Asbury, people are looking for the why. Like, is it real? Is it probably fake? Things are happening, but what's going on? And so I think your testimony of God doing that, like showing you your heart, and then that realization, like, this is real, a confirmation of like God is at work, that resonated with people even that didn't experience it. And I think what was unsustainable in Wilmore, Kentucky, has continued.
It has.
And it does. God's presence has not gone away.
No.
He is with us. But I think the reason that so many people came to that video and were so affected was that testimony that it's real, like that God is working, and I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, I think another aspect of it was that people, they respect or they appreciate your strengths, but they really resonate with your weaknesses. And in that video, I was just completely vulnerable in sharing what I was going through,
Right.
and in humbling myself.
Right.
In that way, there were a lot of other people that
Yeah.
were able to relate to that in a way that was not like, oh, Eric's some kind of super spiritual giant.
Right.
No. So yeah, it was special. And then really as a result of that last year, longing for the light that happened, and just reflecting on that, and then feeling called by God to say, instead of trying to get 100,000 people together in one place, what if we had 100 places with 1,000 people, or 1,000 places with 100 people?
Right.
And so just pitching that vision out there, and we had this really amazing response. And a night of prayer at the beginning of Lent, and a night of prayer kind of toward the end there on Good Friday, and really thousands of people that participated both in person and online in lots of different locations around the United States and around the world.
Right.
And it was kind of a ripple effect of what had begun the previous year there at Wilmore. So anyway, that's episode number 2.
Yeah.
And then episode number 1, the changing seasons of parenting. And this is an episode that seems to have really connected with people that are thinking about parenting and where they're at in those seasons of life. And right now we still have kind of all the seasons represented in our family.
Right.
Last year I kept saying we have 2 in college and 1 in kindergarten, which is a lot of fun, but it's also quite challenging when we try to do anything together as a family, because you're not going to please everybody all the time, for sure.
Yes.
But at the same time, every season has been wonderful. And so that's an episode where we really kind of looked at those seasons and shared some of the some of the tips and tools and as helpful hints to fellow strugglers.
Right. And I think it's funny because that, again, going back to the Asbury thing, I don't know that episode was full of vulnerability, but definitely full of relatability. You're not talking down from the heights of
not at all
having done it and I know the way. It's you're very much in the middle of it, and still, yes, you have children that are difficult as children can be, but I mean, there's a lot of joy in the journey.
There is, and they're not difficult. I would say that the opportunities in parenting far outweigh the difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
We'll go there.
Yeah. Children, yes. As I often say, children are the heritage of the Lord.
Yes. Always with much sincerity.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's just a reminder in the middle of stressful moments that I need to. It's kind of like saying, I will bless the Lord at all times.
Right. Stub toe.
Yes.
Children, never mind.
Are the heritage of the Lord. Well, so that's the top 10 episodes.
Yeah.
And
it's a good list.
There's a lot there. Are there any episodes that are not on that list from Gleaning and Gathering that you think should be? Anything that you think somebody should listen to?
Oh, dear.
Since you have listened
All
extensively.
of them. Thoroughly. Just a second.
All right.
I'm going to do some research. Right. Podcast recommendations, by the way.
Yes.
Because I do listen to more podcasts.
Than just Gleaning and Gathering?
I know.
Really?
Surprise.
Oh, my goodness.
I can't believe it either. Dallas Willard's daughter is produced. Well, anyways, her and the Dallas Willard Foundation are producing the long form teaching of Dallas Willard in podcast form, and it's been super, super wonderful. Also teaching for the heart. Perhaps it's just one of the things that I enjoy thinking about and listening to, but your talk on ecclesiology, what's the purpose, what's the church's purpose and why it matters. That was a really good one. I think super important and something that we don't probably talk about enough.
Yeah. Well, the one that goes along with that is the Once and Future Church.
Oh.
It's probably the one that I've got the most negative feedback about, and actually probably the only one that I had to post-production edit. I went back and deleted some sections to make it a little more palatable to the general audience. There were some things that I didn't need to say, and I listened to it again with my wife. And
who is very good at
deleted some things. So,
yeah.
Well, Kaylynn, thank you so much for taking time. I know you got a boatload of work to do today, and there's lots to accomplish, but thanks for taking time and coming back on the podcast. Great to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
For Gleaning and Gathering. God bless.